In this video, we're going to explore some of the external influences that affect businesses. External influences are things that are outside of the business's control, but which have an impact on the way the business performs and operates. All business owners want to feel in control of their businesses, but sometimes external factors have a major impact on their plans. When businesses are affected by factors outside of their control, they will need to make decisions about the best way to deal with and respond to the changes that are impacting them. There are many external influences that might affect a business, but we will break them into the following categories: stakeholder influence, technology, and the economy. Before we begin to look at each of these in more detail, we're going to meet Pedro Diaz, the owner of a food truck that operates in London called Pedro's Tasty Tapas Limited, specialising in Spanish food using authentic ingredients, many of which are imported from Spain. Pedro employs 2 members of staff, and his business operates as a private limited company. When Pedro first set up, he thought it would be simple. He was born in Spain and he loves to cook high-quality Spanish food. His friends and family encouraged him to turn his hobby into a business. However, when Pedro started trading, he realised that his business was actually affected by many things that were outside of his direct control. Let's first look at stakeholders, who, as we know, are affected by the decisions that businesses make, but just as importantly, can also have a major impact on the way a business operates and performs. As we have discussed in other videos, a stakeholder is anyone who has a stake in the business. In other words, somebody who is impacted by the business and is in some way interested in its success or its failure. Let's have a look at some of the main stakeholders that businesses like Pedro's might have to think about. First of all, shareholders actually own a piece of the business. They want to see the business grow and become profitable so that they have a better chance of receiving higher dividends, which means they might try to influence the business to use its profits to pay dividends instead of reinvesting them into the business. Next up is employees, who of course are part of the business. They may often be represented by external organisations, which we call trade unions, which will campaign for better pay and working conditions for their members, or may choose to lead a strike and stop their members from attending work. The government is another key stakeholder for businesses. They collect taxes from businesses, so they want to see them do well so that they get more tax revenue. We'll look at the impact of taxes on businesses in much more detail in another video. The government may also make grants available in areas where there is high unemployment, in order to influence them to be located and create jobs in deprived areas, to help reduce the level of unemployment. The government is also responsible for creating legislation, in other words, laws that affect businesses. We look at business legislation in much more detail in other videos, but businesses may be impacted by laws that protect consumer rights, laws that protect employee rights, laws around pay and equality, and health and safety laws. These may increase the costs of a business, particularly if staff training is required, and businesses may face hefty fines if they don't follow the legislation. To all the teachers out there, show all of these videos without any ads and gain access to our growing library of over 500 teaching worksheets. Why not visit BizzWizard.co.uk to find out more? Our example, Pedro has to make sure he keeps accurate tax records for his business, covering income tax on his staff wages, VAT on the products he sells, and corporation tax on his profits. If he doesn't submit all of his tax records on time, he could receive a penalty. Higher corporation tax would mean less profit for Pedro, and higher rates of VAT would mean he might have to charge his customers more for their food orders. If the rate of income tax increases, meaning the amount of money the average Joe has to pay the taxman goes up, this may mean Pedro's customers won't have as much money to spend on things like tasty food, therefore affecting his sales. Pedro is also affected by changes in legislation. For example, he has to make sure that he pays his staff at least the minimum wage, and that he's complying with food hygiene and health and safety regulations. It takes time and it costs the business money to make sure that his staff training is up to standard, and if it isn't, well, Pedro could face a hefty fine. Another key stakeholder for businesses is the banks. Banks lend money to businesses as well as provide business banking. They want them to succeed so that their loans get repaid. Pedro's business could also be affected by decisions taken by his bank. Fortunately, Pedro has a good business plan and financial forecast for his business when he set it up, which meant that he was able to open a business bank account and get a startup loan from the bank. He has to provide regular trading updates to the bank and make sure he is making the loan repayments on time, as well as keeping his business bank account in credit. If not, the bank could ask him to repay the loan and might remove his bank account, which would make things particularly difficult for Pedro. Then we have the suppliers to the business, who will want to receive orders from that business as that's how they make their own sales and profit. They also want to be sure that they get paid what they're owed and that they get paid on time. Pedro has several different suppliers for his ingredients. He buys lots of his vegetables, meat and fish from wholesalers in the UK, but he also imports some of the more specialist ingredients such as saffron and paprika from Spain. Pedro's suppliers are also businesses, and they will need to decide whether to give Pedro credit, meaning he can pay his bills after a certain number of days. This could really help Pedro with managing his cash flow, and if they decide not to do this, it may cause a number of problems. Let's not forget about customers. They want decent quality goods that are safe and well priced. Customers may care about ethics, and that might influence their purchasing choices. If demand increases for products that are considered to be ethical, such as fair trade goods, then this may impact what products the business sells and how they advertise them. Pedro's customers will have a big influence on his business. If Spanish food is popular, then Pedro will do well. Customers are so important that Pedro listens to feedback about his menu from them. In fact, he's added a vegan taco and a range of vegan tapas to his menu in response to customer requests for more plant-based menu options. Bring this video and over 100 more to life with fun, interactive games, quizzes and case studies. Why not try the first 25 completely free by visiting BizzWizard.co.uk. The last stakeholders that we will consider are pressure groups that might want to influence businesses to act in a certain way, usually concerning ethical or environmental issues, which we have looked at in other videos. For example, Greenpeace lobbies businesses and governments on environmental issues. We'll look at pressure groups in much more detail in a separate video. On several occasions when Pedro has parked up his food truck, he's been near a stand ran by a local vegan pressure group. They have been very friendly but persistent, and every time they see Pedro's food truck, they give him leaflets about the benefits of a vegan diet for health and for the environment. Pedro's menu changes have helped to keep the pressure group happy. Kinda. Let's take a look at technology, which has had a huge impact on many businesses. For example, Airbnb has used technology to disrupt the market for overnight stays and has had a huge impact on the hotel industry. Another example would be Uber, which has had a massive impact on the taxi industry and has led to taxi firms updating their technology to make their service more efficient and user-friendly for customers, using technology such as online ordering and card payments. Businesses in almost every sector have had to respond to changes in technology that have been developed by new competitors, putting their market share at risk. Technology has also changed the way that products and services are bought and sold. Using e-commerce to sell via the internet means businesses can reach a wider group of customers than ever before. M-commerce, using mobile phone apps to sell products and services, has grown rapidly in recent years and has opened up an even bigger audience of potential customers who wish to shop on their smartphones. And then there's social media and digital communications, which allow businesses to communicate with their customers and staff in a convenient and low-cost way. Businesses have even been able to take advantage of new technology in the form of payment systems and electronic loyalty cards to increase the convenience to the customer. So, let's look at the influence on technology on Pedro's business. Pedro has created an app for his food truck service, allowing customers to see the day's menu and to place their orders in advance. He's also taken advantage of contactless technology and can use an app on his phone in combination with a small card scanner to take payments quickly and conveniently from his customers, which cuts down the queuing time. Pedro and his team are active on social media. Their food is very Instagrammable. It's a great way to keep their customers informed as to where the van is going to be each day and to let them know about new additions to the menu, as well as to get customer feedback and to respond to complaints and queries. And finally, let's just touch briefly on the influence of changes in the economy, although we'll cover this in much more detail in another video. High unemployment usually leads to lower consumer spending, as they have less income, meaning they tend to buy essentials instead of luxuries, affecting sales and profit of a business. However, when there's high unemployment, it might be easier to recruit the staff that you need, and people may be happy to settle for lower wages, bringing down a business's costs. If Pedro needs to recruit staff, he may find it is easier when there's high unemployment, as he'll have more applicants for any jobs he advertises, and as I said, people may settle for lower wages. The opposite is true if unemployment falls, as there will be fewer people looking for jobs. Pedro may find it harder to recruit people to work in his food truck, and he may even have to pay higher wages to keep hold of his staff. When unemployment is high, people may be less likely to treat themselves to a takeaway from Pedro's food truck, as they have less income, and sales might, drop off. Each of the video courses over at BizzWizard.co.uk also includes an interactive business case study that applies the knowledge learned to a real-world scenario. There are over 1,000 multiple-choice questions, each with detailed feedback, which tests students' understanding of the content. Why not visit BizzWizard.co.uk to find out more? We also need to consider inflation as an external influence. Inflation is when prices are rising and the value of money is falling. On one hand, this will usually mean a business can increase its prices in line with the competition. But on the other hand, wage costs and the cost of raw materials are also likely to increase, potentially impacting profit margins. If inflation is high, that means Pedro may be able to increase the price of the food that he sells. However, he's likely to see an increase in the prices of his ingredients, particularly the things he buys in the UK, and his staff may need higher wages to keep up with the higher cost of living, meaning Pedro might be no better off. We now need to consider interest rates. We now need to consider interest rates, which is the amount payable for money borrowed, such as loans and mortgages, or the amount paid for money in savings. If interest rates increase, then Pedro could find that his monthly repayments on his business loan also increase, adding more costs to his business. His customers may also find that they have less disposable income if their mortgage payments have gone up, and they could be more likely to save instead of spending money on takeaways, which will harm Pedro's sales and probably his profits. However, if interest rates fall, Pedro might be more likely to invest in his business, as the cost of a loan will likely be cheaper. His customers are likely to have more disposable income and are less likely to put their money into savings, meaning Pedro's sales and profits may increase. And finally, exchange rates can affect the amount of business done abroad. If a country has a strong currency, it will be cheaper for businesses in that country to import goods or raw materials. But it will also be more expensive to export, meaning people and businesses in other countries won't buy your goods. The opposite is also true. If your country has a weak currency, then it will lead to cheaper exports and more expensive imports. The price Pedro has to pay for the ingredients that he imports from Spain will be affected by the exchange rate. If the value of the pound is high compared to the value of the euro, which is the currency used in Spain, then every pound will buy more ingredients from Spain. If the value of the pound drops compared to the euro, then it will be more expensive for Pedro to bring in the ingredients that he needs, and he may need to increase the prices that he charges his customers to cover these higher costs. As we have seen, there are many external influences that will impact Pedro and any other business. If you get a question on the impact of external influences on a business, it's worth putting yourself in the shoes of the owner, just like Pedro, and thinking through all of the things outside of the business that could affect them, both in a positive way and in a negative way. This has been the BizzWizard. See you in